Kia ora, Year 9. In this video, I'm going to go over the basic work we do on circles in this measurement unit. So I'm going to start by looking at some terminology around circles, and then we're going to move on to finding the circumference and the area of a circle. Okay, so first of all, let's take a look at just the names for some parts of the circle. Now, some of you will know these already. When we've got a circle, the distance from the center of the circle out to anywhere on the edge of the circle, which we call the circumference, is called the radius. And we almost always shorten that in maths to the letter R. Okay, so that's the radius. Then the next big idea that we're going to use all the time, that we already saw in class, is the line through the center from one side of the circle to the other side. And we call that the diameter. And we shorten that to D. So when we talk about the circumference of the circle, we actually mean two things. We mean the points that are on the edge, but we really mean the length. So we should really say the length of the circumference. But usually we just say find the circumference of the circle, right? So what does that mean? Well, find the circumference of the circle means figure out how long it is to go all the way around the shape and back to the start. So that's finding the circumference. The other basic skill we need is how to find the area, right? And so the area of a circle is all of this, right, with much better colouring in than what I'm doing there. So let's think for a minute about what the units are going to be for those two things. The circumference is a length. So the circumference is going to have units that match the length, for example, centimetres or metres. The area, though, will have the same kind of units as when we looked at rectangles and parallelograms and triangles. So the area units will be squared units, so things like centimetres squared or metres squared. Now, there are heaps of other words that go with circles. We're going to learn some along the way. The only other one that I'm going to use in this video is the word arc. And so I'll just draw, let's see if I can draw another circle really quickly. There we go. So an arc on a circle, oops, let's just get the right thing. An arc on a circle, what am I trying to find, is just measuring a little bit of the outside, or sometimes a lot of the outside. So we say that this is an arc, right? That bit there, that might be an arc. And we'd call that a minor arc because it's less than half. Here we've got another arc, and because that's more than half, we call that a major arc. You don't really need to know that in Year 9, but you'll come across lots of jargon when you're dealing with circles, so it's good to get confident with it. Now, the last thing that comes up whenever we're talking about circles that I know lots of you will have done things with at primary and intermediate school is the amazing number pi, right? So I wouldn't be a proper maths teacher if I didn't think pi was super cool, and I do. But I also know that some of you probably just want to watch this video and learn the three basic skills. So I'm going to talk a little bit about pi and leave that for you to explore. So what is pi? Well, pi is a number, but we can never finish writing it, right? So it never ever repeats. It's called an irrational number, and it goes on forever. And it starts off like this. So let's get a better pen. So the first few digits of pi go like this, 3.141593, and on it goes. And people spend their lives getting really into pi. And for those of you who might be in that category, this link here is a really fun pi quiz. If we don't have COVID next year, we'll have Pi Week again, and we have a competition for who knows the most digits. And if you know Josh Langford, he is the current Wellington College pi record holder. So where does pi come from? Well, one way to think about pi is to look at this circle, right? So I've drawn this circle so that the length from here to here is 1 unit. I'm trying to draw that and it's not drawing. Why is it not drawing? There we go. Okay, so the length here is 1 unit. And we're going to try and figure out how long it is if we go all around that circle. So you can see those different letters written on there. And if you take each pair of letters and you draw the arc from them, here's what we've got. This length here, so this radius, which has got a length of 1, is exactly the same as that arc length. So you can imagine taking a piece of string that's 1 unit long and seeing how many times it's going to fit around to go from the start all the way around to the end, right? So we're taking the piece of string and then we're sticking it onto our circle. So we've done the first one, so that's 1 there. Here's the next one, right? So that's 2 bits of string. And the third one. I know that some of you are going, man, this is a really slow video, right? But there we are, there's the third one. And you can see that it's going to fit just a little bit more than 6 times. So there's the fourth one. And the fifth one. And we're nearly back to the top now, right? So just going over again, how long is each of these little arcs? Well, it is exactly the length of the radius. And then we've got this little bit over there. And it turns out that it would take us 6.283 blah, 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 blah bits of radius. And that would be the same no matter how big the radius was. So for any circle, what we can say is that the circumference is equal to this. It's the radius times 2 lots of pi, right? So pi is roughly 3.14. So 2 lots of that gives me about 6.283. Now, when you're doing your calculations for this topic, we don't want you to just use 3.14. You've all got good $20 calculators. So there's a button on your calculator that will give you a better approximation for pi. So this is my first formula that we've got for finding the circumference, right? So the circumference of a circle is equal to the radius times 2 times pi. And we usually write that as C is equal to 2 pi r. But if you go back to the first slide, you'll remember that we had the radius, but we also had the diameter, right? And the diameter is equal to a radius here and another radius here. So the diameter is the same as 2 times the radius. That means that another formula for finding the circumference is pi times the diameter. So here we've got our first 2 formulae. So if you could please just chuck those down into your maths book now. They are pretty important, right? So to find the circumference of the circle from the radius and from the diameter, we've got this formula and we've got this formula. The last thing that we're going to do in this video is look at the formula for the area of a circle. So the area of a circle is equal to pi times the radius squared. So let's suppose that I've got a radius here of 5 centimeters. We can find the circumference of that circle, which is going to be 2 pi times 5. So we put that in our calculator. That's going to equal 10 times pi, and that gives me 31.415, blah, 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 blah. And the units there will be centimeters, right? Because the units here are centimeters. We're going to round that number, and I'm going to round that to 31.4 centimeters. So 1 decimal place more accurate than what I started with here. So I want some sensible rounding when I'm working with measuring things. So that's how we find the circumference, right? So that's telling me that if I measure all around the outside, I would get that number, 31.4 centimeters. And we'd like to see you setting your working out for circumference problems like that. Now, the next thing that I can figure out is what is the area of that circle. Only I've lost the circle now, so let's just move on to another circle that we've got. Okay, so suppose this is 5 centimeters. What's the area of it going to be? So when I'm finding the area, I'm looking for this inside here. And my units are going to be centimetres squared. So the area formula is pi times the radius squared. So it's equal to pi times 5 times 5, which is 25 times pi. And that gives me an answer here of 78.53982, blah, 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 which is a pretty silly number. So we're going to round that to 78.5 centimetres squared. Okay, so that's your first example of how to find the area of a circle. But there's one more thing we haven't practiced yet, and that's an example of how to find the circumference when we've got the diameter. Okay, so here's my circle. My diameter here, I'm going to say, is 8 meters across. Obviously not to scale. This one's really easy. The formula is the circumference is equal to pi times the diameter. So it's just pi on my calculator times 8. That gives me roughly 25.13274, which is approximately 25.1 meters, and I'm rounding that to 1 decimal place. Now, just one last thing. If you were given this situation and you had to find the area, just remember that when I find the area, I need to work with the radius. I can't work with the diameter. So if the diameter is 8, then the radius is going to be half of that. So the radius will be 4 meters. And so then I can use this formula. But I'll leave that for you to work out for some practice. Okay, so you should be good to do quite a few of the Dr. Frost skills now that you've watched this. Just make sure that you've got these examples in your book, please. So if you missed them when you were going through, I want you to pause the video, just rewind it back to where I start going through these and get that working down into your maths books. Thanks for watching.